the location of the emergency?
Bonanza Creek Ranch has had 2 people accidentally shot on a movie set by a prop gun. We need help immediately.
Welcome to the worst day of my life.
They'd hand you a cold gun, no charges. They always hand you a cold gun with nothing in it to rehearse.
What's your place of employment?
Here?
I turn and cock the gun goes off. It's supposed to be a cold gun.
What's your job there with them?
I'm the armor, or at least I was.
How might Hannah Gutierrez's demeanor impact the jury in the Baldwin Movie Shooting Trial? And Bryan Kohberger in court today wanting his case moved out of Moscow. Plus, Jesse Alvarez is accused of murdering his ex's fiancée. But will his suspicious statements tip the scales of justice? It's all coming up next for you right here on Opening Statements. Good Wednesday morning to you and welcome to Opening Statements. I'm your host, Julie Grant. It's great to have you along with us this morning. Just like the actual opening statements at trial, here on this show, we get you all ready for what's ahead in the courtroom. So grab a cup of coffee. I say the show's kind of like coffee and court. Grab a cup now. It's time for my opening statement. The way I see it, there are 2 kinds of people in this world. Those who make it a better place and those who make it worse. Thankfully, most people are like you, good people who make our world a better place. UGA nursing student Laken Riley was one of those good people too. She was going to dedicate her career to helping other people. Doesn't get much better than that, does it? That beautiful, smart, talented, beloved angel deserved to experience all of the great things this life has to offer. But sadly, some rotten, sinister, dangerous monster took her life and beat her so brutally, he disfigured her skull. Police say the killer is this man, Jose Ibarra, a 26-year-old illegal immigrant. He should have been deported when he was arrested twice before, but he wasn't. Instead, laws were ignored, and more laws were allegedly broken by him. Now, if police are correct, and if what they're saying about this guy is true, if he did murder Laken Riley, then he should be faced with the most severe punishment we have in America, the death penalty. Someone who comes into our country illegally and doesn't go through our legal process to receive citizenship and does harm to one of our citizens should not be afforded the protections of our criminal justice system. If you come here illegally and you harm an innocent American citizen, it should be off to Guantanamo you go. In close, I'll say this, my heart breaks for the Riley family, and I know yours does too. And I pray that while that family endures this tragedy, that they feel all of the love and support coming from all of the good people in this world, the good people like you, as the good people far outnumber the bad. That's my opening statement on this Wednesday morning. Let me know if you like it. Right now, I want to give you what's on your daily docket.
Welcome to the worst day of my life. Hey, things happen. I can't believe Alec Baldwin was holding the gun. That's so can't believe it. Oh, that's all right. Just take a deep breath and we'll work this all out, okay?
All right, now to some of the cases we're following for you today on Court TV. In New Mexico, testimony resumes at 10:30 a.m. in the Baldwin movie shooting case against armorer Hannah Gutierrez. In Idaho, murder defendant Bryan Kohberger is due in court at 4 p.m. And in Ohio, defendant Lisa Necrelli due in court at 10:30 a.m. for her child enticement case. Right now, let's get you more on what we can expect today for Bryan Kohberger and bring in Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson, who's got the latest for us. Matt, good morning.
Julie, good morning. Another big day in Idaho with suspected killer Bryan Kohberger back in court this afternoon, asking for a change in venue. We might actually finally get that trial date nailed down. Today's hearing in Moscow, Idaho could be critical. We could learn more about about the case deadlines for discovery, outstanding motions, and disclosures for expert witnesses. And there will be a lot of those because DNA is critical to the case. Now, Kohberger is accused of killing 4 college students back in 2022. Ethan, Kylie, Madison, and Zaina. We could also hear arguments on that change of venue. The defense filing a motion after last month's hearing. They were talking about it. They wrote this: a fair and impartial jury cannot be found in Latah County owing to the extensive inflammatory pretrial publicity allegations made about Mr. Kohberger to the public by the media. The small size of the community, the salacious nature of the alleged crimes, and the severity of the charges Mr. Kohberger faces. Now, the last big trial we know in Idaho where there was a change of venue, Lori Vallow Daybell. So it's possible. Today's hearing happening again at 4 o'clock Eastern. Of course, we'll bring you all the updates, Julie.
Thanks so much for that. We turn now to New Mexico, where Defendant Hannah Gutierrez's appearance in the courtroom has many trial watchers talking. How about you? So on Tuesday, she wore this updo to court. A stark difference from the day of the shooting, where her hair is purple and yellow. But her demeanor in the courtroom and in her police interview really appears to be the same. Some are saying she looks bored.
That might be a regular live round, though.
It looks pretty. That's what they were thinking. It could be a live round. No. I just think you said, and I think that's why there's protocol because of Lee when all that happened on set too. Was there anything that stuck out of ordinary today to you?
No, I mean, just the whole camera crew quit.
Now, let's talk a little bit about this. We want to bring in our guest now, public relations specialist and the president of Reputation, Dr. Mike Paul is with us. Also, we have criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Franz Borchardt. Great to see you both this morning. So let's talk a little bit about the optics. This is something that we talk about with every single trial. We know the importance of it. Mike, let's go to you first on this. This is what you do, the optics. If you had to bet, would you bet there's a team working with Hannah Gutierrez to consult with her on her image?
Yeah, but there would also be a team on the opposing side. You know, one of the things I do is it's called litigation communications or litigation support PR, which is to help the legal team to craft the right messages, the right verbiage, the right words, the right adjectives that will help them. She looks not only bored, she looks aloof. I wouldn't only focus on the way she's dressed now. I'd be focused on who she was and who she is as an armorer. She showed up to a set that way. She had that demeanor on the set that day. She's also a Gen Z. Why would I throw that into the labeling? Because she's the daughter of an armorer. She was taught by an expert, her father, and what do we know that often happens when someone is the child of? They don't go through the same strict and rigid responsibility that's needed. You know, she had a fanny pack of which she had bullets in it. All of that imagery goes to one important word, which is trust. If she wasn't trustworthy on that set and she was given that opportunity to do her job and did not do so and put other people's lives at risk, that's the position that she really needs to be focused on, even more than in her hair.
I have a clip I want to play. This is her first interview with police, and she's talking about wishing she would have checked the gun more.
They're not supposed to pull the hammer back, but it still is a prop gun or prop.
It's a real gun. Or real gun.
Your prop.
Yeah.
Set.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, totally. I know. I don't know. I wish I would have checked it more.
Okay, so Franz, one of the things I've been thinking about here, I'm sure you've had this happen where in some cases with defendants, if, for instance, like she's got the yellow and purple hair, which she's not brought into the courtroom, probably per the consultants who've advised her, you know, you don't want a distracting look, you want to appear soft, respectful to the court, and not give anything for a juror to not like about you. There may be someone who may hold that against her, right? That being said, some defendants don't have video of them with that look that some people might not like, but here she's got the video. So Franz, if you're defense counsel, do you still go with the soft look at trial that she's going for here?
Well, you know, the balance is, are you putting lipstick on a pig that's going to be immediately evident and you know, I mean, that's the real question, right? If it were me, I would absolutely clean her up. She does look marketably better in court in terms of her appearance than she did back then. Now, in the same breath, I would also voir dire on the fact that, look, I wish my client looked like Cinderella after she put the glass slipper on, but she doesn't, right?
Right.
And so I would voir dire on this very mince words about it. She looked rough back then. She looked like someone that had some life going on. We know that there's drug use. We know that, you know, now the boredom question is a totally different topic, though, Julie. I don't, that is something that baffles me, why her demeanor is being allowed by her defense team.
Right, right. And I've got another clip for you on that, Franz. Thank you for that. Let's take a look into the second interview. She looks a little bit different in the second interview, and she's talking about trying to hold her ground.
I also kind of really held my ground on not, you know, spreading myself too incredibly thin.
Or getting overran by others.
Yeah, exactly. Because you kind of just have to, you know, but ultimately with higher positions, sometimes you get ran over.
Okay.
Okay, so Mike, let me go back to you on this point. Her demeanor is consistent. I will say that it's consistently that very calm, very relaxed kind of attitude. Could this just be her, that she just has that kind of personality?
Well, I do think that that's her. And the key word that I'd be focused on here is a lack of focus. If you're not focused in the way you speak, if you're not focused in understanding boundaries, if you're not focused regarding safety, you can't be an armorer. I don't care if your father is one of the best armorers in the world. You don't get a pass. And that will also go to others that have their situations as well tied to the Rust trial, which is those that were producers and others. Did you pick the wrong person? Were you leaning on the reputation of her father instead of leaning on the reputation of a young Gen Z armorer who isn't focused, who's callous, who is careless, and you took a risk, and as a result, it ended with someone losing their lives, sadly.
Franz, back to you on the boredom question, please. What advice would you give her if she were your client? We know the case is being televised. People are watching it all over the world. What would you say to her in terms of getting it together and appearing properly for the cameras?
Well, if I had a client that had a resting bored face, like she does, I would have her taking notes the entire trial so that she's looking down, taking notes the entire time. And candidly, I don't care if she's doodling. I just don't want her looking bored. And I have to convey that to her. But again, also in jury selection, I may talk to the jury and say, look, my client is in a lose-lose situation. If she sits here the way she normally sits, she looks bored. But that's not really boredom, it's fear. She's probably terrified. She probably never anticipated being on trial for this crime in this tragic, unnecessary death. So part of it's communication with the jury on the front end, and part of it is you've got to give her something to do to where if she can't fix her face, as my child says, she has at least something to do to where we're not just staring at her looking bored.
Right. Your child is right, Franz. You know, and maybe treat her like a child, right? I'm sure you've done this with clients. Give them a legal pad. Give them a couple of markers and pens, whatever they need. And if they're going to write a story, let her write a story. Even if she's not paying attention to the evidence, the jury will think that she is. All right. We got to leave it there for now. We'll see how she looks today and how she acts. And if she loses, as Franz said, her resting bored face. When we come back, oh, we're not bored. We got a lot to talk about. We've got the latest latest on the assault allegations. Have you heard about this? Against Taylor Swift's father. And we've got the latest in the forensics in the Bryan Kohberger case.
I'm the armor, or at least I was.
A famous actor in a movie set accident that ended in tragedy.
I turn and cock the gun goes off.
Now, Alec Baldwin and the film's armorer have both been charged with involuntary manslaughter.
Just because it's an accident doesn't mean that it's not criminal.
Court TV takes you inside the courtroom as Hannah Gutierrez faces a jury.
The Baldwin Movie Shooting Trial. Live coverage today, only on Court TV.
Now for what's trending in true crime. The father of singer Taylor Swift is in some hot water. A photographer in Australia has accused Scott Swift of assault just hours after the final leg of his daughter Taylor's Australian tour. Ben McDonald told police that he was punched by the pop star's dad while trying to take a picture of her. But Swift's camp paints a different version of events. Her representation issuing this statement to ABC News, quote, two individuals were aggressively pushing their way towards Taylor, grabbing at her security personnel and threatening to throw a female staff member into the water. So we recognize we have limited information on this story, but differing versions of events. The question is, though, should Scott Swift be charged? Let's bring in our power panel and talk about it. Still with me, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Franz Borchardt, entertainment reporter Kinsey Schofield, and criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Joe Tamburino. Joe, would you start us off, please? Should Scott Swift be charged?
Good morning, Julie. No, I don't think he should be. He's 71 years old. I mean, you know, they were going out of the location. There's all this paparazzi. Even Mr. McDonald, who's the alleged victim, says basically he wasn't really injured. He got hit in the face. So, yes, there's disputed facts. I don't think they're going to charge him. I wouldn't. He's got a self-defense claim potentially. He's also got a defense of others claim potentially if these paparazzi, if these photographers were trying to really get at Taylor and her entourage. So I think in the end, why do it? I don't see it happening.
I'm with you, Joe. I would be really shocked if this happened. Franz, tell me your thoughts on this.
Swiftie, so I'm biased. But the only thing I like better.
That's cool.
The only thing I like better than a Taylor Swift song is a good old-fashioned defense of a father defending his daughter. And I would love to defend him if they decided to prosecute him. I agree. I don't think this is really a criminal matter. If you want to sue him and y'all want to go after some of that Swiftie money, that's fine. I think this would be a really, really, really big waste of resources to go after this guy who has a clear defense, self-defense, and defense of others defense.
I had a feeling that you would agree with Joe on that. Yeah, I'm with you guys. Legally, I just don't see it unless there's more information. And Kinsey Schofield, that's why we want to bring you in. You're always on the ball with these stories. Tell us, what else are you hearing with this one, please?
Absolutely. Well, this photographer has a history with women, celebrities in Australia. There was a temporary restraining order granted against him. The actress Nicole Kidman felt threatened by him, and she was granted a temporary restraining order. Additionally, Scott, Taylor's dad, does not have a history of violence. He has a history of sneaking Taylor Swift fans VIP sandwiches and upgrading their tickets. So I think if a judge were to look at, or, you know, a prosecutor was to look at these facts, they'd go, you know what, there's a real difference in behavior here. I might side with Taylor's dad, who was just defending his daughter.
Right. Kinsey, I knew you would have some good information for us. It sounds like this guy chases trouble, or maybe is trouble, this photographer. So thank you for that. We'll keep watching it, and the Swifties will keep on being supportive of her, no doubt. Let's switch gears now to a far more serious case involving an aggravated assault. This one in Athens, Georgia. We're learning about new details of the death of Lake and Riley. Jose Ibarra is the man accused of killing Riley, and according to the affidavit of probable cause, Riley's skull was severely disfigured. She was beaten so badly, the beating disfigured her beautiful face. Look at this. Now, the nursing student's body, we know, was found near Georgia's intramural fields. She went out for a run. She didn't come back home. Monday, the university held a vigil on campus to remember the 22-year-old.
Campus is really heavy right now. We're all heartbroken. I want to use this time to tell you about Lakin and all she was to Alpha Chi. It is so obvious to me why it feels so dark right now, and that is because we lost one of the brightest lights that there's ever been. This campus and our sisterhood will never be the same without Lakin Riley.
All right, so given the severity of these facts, we've got kidnapping allegations, we've got aggravated assault, we've got murder, we've got abuse of a corpse. We have everything here that could warrant the death penalty. Should prosecutors pursue it? We've got a special prosecutor handling this case. Let's bring back in our power panel. And we have two former prosecutors on this panel this morning. So let me start with you, gentlemen. Franz, to you first, please. Would you start us off? Do you think the death penalty should be legally sought here?
So generally, state law is that you need to have certain aggravators that those boxes have to be checked so that legally you can pursue it, right? So there's two questions. Can they lawfully pursue it under state law? Absolutely. Should they lawfully pursue it? And I got to tell you, this is an individual that doesn't respect the laws of our country, clearly is accused of doing a horrible crime. You know, if in fact he is guilty, if in fact he did this, I think this would be one of those cases that would check all the boxes. Now, we don't know if there's any mitigators. That's the other side of the coin. Are there mitigators that would justify putting him away for life instead of the death penalty? And ultimately, only time will tell on that question. But, you know, just scratching the surface, yes, I think this is one of those cases.
Franz, thank you for that. Joe Tamburino, do you agree?
Yes, I completely agree. In Georgia, there are a number of so-called boxes, as your other guest stated, that have to be checked in order to get to a death penalty case. And two would apply here. First, that this was done allegedly in the commission of an aggravated assault. And second, that it was done in an inhumane or outrageously vile manner, which it seems to be the case here. And there's so many things wrong in this case. I mean, this Alvarez shouldn't even have been in the country, period. There's no way he should have been here. He simply crossed the border and then he started committing crimes, supposedly. He was arrested in New York before this, and then he was released. And then he goes to Georgia. Again, that's what the allegations are, and he does this. So under Georgia law, there's at least two grounds to seek the death penalty, and I think they should.
I'm with you, Joe. I am with you both 100%. And the public sentiment with this case, it's really overwhelming. Kinsey, would you kindly speak to that, please? The showing of support for this young woman who wanted to do so much good in the world and is attacked at a time when she was least suspected, on a run on her campus where she should have been safe.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're not surprised by the amount of outrage that this particular story it's just upset so many individuals because of a lot of the facts that we've heard over the last few minutes. Him not supposed to be in this country, her on a jog. That's a meditative experience. That's, you know, that's supposed to be a peaceful experience, good for her mental health. And what a frightening and horrific, it's a horrible way to go. She was so beautiful and had so much to look forward to. And you do see a real rise in anger on social media. I think it was in 2023 in Georgia, 77% of Republican voters that were surveyed said they believed in the death penalty. And this does seem like a death penalty case.
Sure does. Kinsey Schofield, thank you for all of that. We've got to say goodbye, and of course, much thanks to you for everything this morning. We'll see you soon, Kinsey. Franz and Joe are sticking around with us. We hope you do too. Here's what we have coming up next on Opening Statements.
We don't have, obviously, cases like this on a normal basis. We're not the big city stuff. And
Sure.
So this is definitely different for all of us, and it hit really close to home, and it's pretty horrific, actually.
Our experts weigh in on the facts in the Idaho college student murder case. Plus, Jesse Alvarez made some suspicious statements about shooting people before the shooting of Mario Fierro. Well, what he said tip the scales of justice. Welcome back. This morning, we're shining a spotlight on the Idaho Student Murders case as accused killer Bryan Kohberger is due in court this afternoon. Now, he's alleged to have stabbed to death Madison Mogan, Kaylee Gonsalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle, leaving behind nothing but devastation and a bloody knife sheath.
We know that the autopsies confirmed the identity of the 4 victims, determined the cause and manner of death as a homicide by stabbing, and determined that it was likely all 4 victims who were asleep during the attack. Some of the victims had defensive wounds, and each victim was stabbed multiple times. There was no sign of sexual assault.
All right, as we look ahead to this trial, let's examine the evidence that we have so far. We recognize we don't have it all, but we have a good bit to dig into. We've got great guests to help us do that. Forensic death investigator, professor, and the host of the Body Bags podcast, Joseph Scott Morgan. And still with us, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor, Franz Borghardt. Professor Joe, I'd like to start with you, please, because you've done a lot of analysis on the forensics from the beginning in this case. And I'm curious, what makes sense to you in terms of, we know the state has accused Bryan Kohberger. What with the forensics aligns with that, and what doesn't?
Okay, here's the bottom line for me. I think that we focus a lot on the DNA, and DNA is certainly going to be relevant in this case. However, I think a lot of the digital data is going to come into play. I still remember back to the initial moments when this case went down and they began to look for that white car, a few days after that. And when they were able to kind of get an idea of the type of car, then they began to zero in on potentially what phones were pinging in that area. And the digital evidence, I think, along with the videography that they have, is going to be a major driver behind this case. And it's almost like a 3-legged stool, I guess, lacking a better analogy. And the DNA evidence that they have that comes off of the knife sheath snap is just kind of the cherry on top, if you will. I think the question is going to be relative to IGG, which is investigative genetic genealogy, is how was it utilized? Because this is relatively new. You think about everything that we do to test the rigor of what we put forth in cases and that sort of thing. And, you begin to think about Daubert hearings and all those sorts of things. And I don't know that it has passed that level. I think that the defense is going to really dig their heels in that particular area. How did they access that information? And how do they validate the testing that went forward from there?
Professor Joe, thank you for all of that. Those are 3 big things. 3 big things you just stated with us align with the state's charging: the car evidence, the cell phone evidence, and the DNA evidence. Let's talk a little more about the DNA evidence now. I've got a clip from Shannon Gray. He represents the Gonsalves family. Let's watch.
I think the biggest piece of evidence that jumps out to you is the DNA evidence on the sheet. I think that's the one piece of evidence that will be hard to explain as a defense attorney on the case.
Agreed. Franz Borghardt, let's tap into your defense expertise. How do you combat this at trial?
Well, I think what you have to do is you have to dig in and claim that the DNA is unreliable. That if it's unreliable, that you cannot draw the conclusion that it's his DNA on this sheath. And yes, while the digital evidence, the GPS, all that together as circumstantial evidence does paint a very good picture that he did this crime, if that one DNA domino falls, do you have proof beyond a reasonable doubt just based on the digital evidence? And I think it comes to this point of you have to argue that in a purely circumstantial evidence case, the state has the burden to exclude every reasonable hypothesis of innocence, which is fancy legalese, which means that if he was just in the area, that in and of itself is not enough. Now, this is if you can get the DNA on the sheaf, which that's a big if, right? That's a big if. It's a sheaf with his DNA on it. If you can get that either found to be unreliable or excluded, then I think there's a pathway to an argument. I don't know that it works. I think people are going to be intrigued by this new way of doing DNA. And I think it's going to be essentially what you also have to believe is that the sheaf was somehow, some way planted, right? So again, I think that's what you have to do to defend him. I just don't know if there's a pathway to that working.
Mm-hmm, right, but those are all great thoughts you shared with us, Franz, about this. And I have to hand it to Kohberger's defense team. This is an area where they can win. This area in the DNA, that what they're trying to do right now and exclude that information, asking the court to have the state turn over everything they used to do the IgG testing that the professor mentioned, that's worth their time. And believe me, I've called them out for all the things that were a waste of time, like when they said there wasn't probable cause, or when they said beyond a reasonable doubt was the standard for indictment. You know, that all was ridiculous, but this is not. Okay, let's talk about the house and the floor plan of it. Professor Joe, back to you. We've got to look at the map, and we know the layout of this house was kind of strange. It was an oddly designed house. We know that two of the victims were on the second floor, Xana and Ethan in that bedroom, and the top part of the diagram there, that's the back of the house. You know, and then on the third floor, we know it was where Maddie and Kaylee were found. Professor, how much do you think the house layout is going to matter here to either side's case, really?
Well, you kind of made the argument, Julie, because it's such an oddball kind of structure. And, you know, for those of us that have lived in college towns, I currently live in one, obviously. You know, all of us know what off-campus housing is like, and rental units, you know, and they just kind of get added onto over the years. I remember early on we were having a discussion, I think it was with the former AG for Idaho, and a buddy of his, their child had lived in this house before that second or the third floor was actually added. Can you imagine that?
Wow.
To the structure? And he was talking about how this thing has kind of developed over a period of time. And that goes to familiarity, though, doesn't it? If you're looking at one individual, how were they so familiar and confident in this environment that they could move through this environment with ease and speed? I think that that's another thing, because we've got a very small window. How are they able to facilitate this type of savage attack? And trust me, this is savage, Julie. How can they perpetrate this in this environment, perhaps in the dark? You're walking around through a residence that maybe you've never been through. Maybe you were just in the brush line observing from a distance. Who knows? But I think that that's a salient point. Again, I go back to the idea of raising the house. I had a real problem with that. I made quite a bit of noise over that when it occurred, because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand the rationale for it at that particular time. But, you know, the prosecution obviously has documented it very well, and we'll see what they do with it.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you, Professor Joe. I just can't understand why the state wouldn't fight harder to preserve that house, at least through the trial.
Yeah.
You look like you're about to say something. Go ahead, Professor.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Please,
I don't
no,
mean
no,
to
no,
step
don't
on
be sorry.
Franz. One other thing here that's very curious, the defense is going to make hay over, and we're going back to the DNA. The specter kind of raises its head here, and that's the idea that we've got these other unknown samples of male DNA, and they have painted that, I think, in the news as something that's very ominous and sinister, and that's their job, I think. But we have to understand, you know, the volume of people that were passing through this home. I think the defense is probably going to argue, well, you didn't necessarily, at least on the surface from what we know right now, you didn't follow that all the way through, you know, with these other unknown samples. Why didn't you press as hard on those as you did on our client? And I think that that's going to be another area where they're going to try to get a toehold here. And they don't have a lot, but I think that that's going to be a significant question that's going to come up.
Mm-hmm. It most certainly is. Thank you for that, Professor. I want to talk about another area where the defense can potentially win, and that's with the witness. The witness, Dylan Mortensen, and we've got to look at what was included in the affidavit about what she saw. We know there are 2 surviving roommates in that household, Dylan Mortensen and another roommate named Bethany Funk, and Dylan is the one who maybe saw Bryan Kohberger, maybe. So let's look at some of what she said. She said she heard who she thought was Gonsalves, Kaylee Gonsalves, saying something to the effect of, "There's someone here." She then later said she heard what she thought was crying from Xana Kernodle's room. She then heard a male voice say something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." She later opened her door, saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking toward her. She described the figure as 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. The male then walked past her towards the back sliding glass door. She locked herself in her room after seeing that male, and we know she did not call 911 until the next morning. That's been a huge point of contention for many people watching this case. It's angered a lot of people. Franz, tell me here, we know this was done by indictment. Kohberger was brought from the district court up into big court through indictment, not through a preliminary hearing, so we never had that in-court ID where Dylan Mortensen testified and said, yes, that's the guy, him right there. We didn't have that. Do you think the defense can make some headway here with this witness?
I think if that witness could identify this defendant, we would have already heard it. So I assume that there will never be a identification. The description doesn't necessarily not fit, but it doesn't entirely fit either. Like 5 foot, he seems a bit taller, right? 5 foot or more, that's kind of nebulous. So I think the witness is a piece of evidence, but you know, I would just tackle, you can't identify this individual as the person that committed this crime. And if they're being truthful and honest, they'll probably say yes. Now, that doesn't get me past the DNA. That doesn't get me past the other forensic evidence. But it sure does help that I'm also going to get to argue that, man, this crime scene was destroyed before this case was even resolved.
Right, Franz. You both made great points on this one. We'll leave it here for now. Again, Kohberger will be in court at 4 p.m. today, and we will have all of the details. We may get the trial date. We still don't know when this case is going to trial. Maybe it'll be set today. Big thanks to Joseph Scott Morgan. We've got to say goodbye to you. Thank you, Professor, for your time. And Franz, you're coming along with us as we talk about what is tipping the scales of justice. Here's what we have next.
He had asked me where is the best place to shoot someone to kill them. I corrected him and told him that we do not shoot to kill someone. We train to stop a threat.
Jurors heard from the firearms instructor you just saw there about defendant Jesse Alvarez's suspicious statements about shooting and killing someone. And he made those statements prior to the killing of Mario Fierro. Do his comments point to his guilt? Talk about it next.
I'm the armor, or at least I was.
A famous actor in a movie set accident that ended in tragedy.
I turn and cock the gun goes off.
Now, Alec Baldwin and the film's armorer have both been charged with involuntary manslaughter.
Just because it's an accident doesn't mean that it's not criminal.
Court TV takes you inside the courtroom as Hannah Gutierrez faces a jury.
The Baldwin Movie Shooting Trial. Live coverage today, only on Court TV.
Day. And now for what's tipping the scales of justice in the lover stalker murder trial. The jury heard some very damaging testimony about Jesse Alvarez. Alvarez visited a gun range right before his alleged murder of victim Mario Fierro. And his comments that he made to a firearms instructor at the range during their session could be pretty hard to dispute for his defense team. Take a look.
So he approached me with many questions. There was specifically 2 that jumped out to me. He had asked me where is the best place to shoot someone to kill them. I corrected him and told him that we do not shoot to kill someone. We train to stop a threat. Then he asked me a follow-up question. He said, well, what about the back of the head? So those jumped out at me. So you generally would shoot to stop a threat, meaning you would defend yourself until that person is no longer a threat to you. They could die as a byproduct of that, but generally we wouldn't teach that that's the intention of why you're using a firearm.
Oh, I don't know. This goes to premeditation, maybe. Let's bring in our guest, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Joe Tamburino is with us. Joe, what do you think here, please?
Alvarez is going to have a tough case because I totally agree with you. It goes to premeditation. This goes hand in hand with the evidence of him supposedly using his brother's car to drive around the victim's house, his internet search history about how to basically kill people. And this is devastating. When you have someone who says the defendant in a self-defense case asked me, what's the best way to kill somebody? And he brings up shooting someone behind the head. That means planning, a forethought, planning ahead of time. So this is very damaging evidence to him. And I think, you know, I don't know how he's going to get beyond it.
Right, Joe. Yeah, I'm with you. It really is. And something else I was thinking about, you know, the context in which he said it, right? At a firearms training course, you're talking about deadly force. That's what's being discussed. You know, maybe it wasn't so eyebrow raising at the time to this gun instructor because people are envisioning these scenarios which they might get in, God forbid, one day and need to shoot to stop the threat and protect themselves. Whereas if he would have said it to a friend or someone, a layperson, not a firearms expert, I wonder if that person would have gone, oh my, what is he planning? We better do something here and look into this. It may have seemed more sinister. Your thoughts on that?
Yes, and just by him saying, how about the back of the head? Because if you're taking firearms instruction, if you're learning how to use a gun, you're learning how to act in self-defense, you're not going to be shooting someone in the back of the head. In almost all self-defense cases, it happens in a tussle or people are facing each other. Perhaps even the defendant receives some type of bodily injuries. But rarely is it that all of a sudden in some altercation, you walk behind the so-called perpetrator and shoot him in the back of the head. So just by him asking that is the best way to kill someone, shooting him in the back of the head, that speaks volumes of what his intent is.
Yeah, it sure does. It sure does. This guy's in big trouble, I think. We've got his ex-girlfriend, the victim's fiance, and she's a victim too, as we know, Joe, Amy Jambara. She's talking about in this next clip about how she kept trying to get away from Jesse Alvarez, and yet he just wasn't taking no for an answer.
Shortly after I saw the defendant attempted to get into my apartment, I knew that I didn't feel safe because I told him no.
Okay, Joe, thoughts on her? This woman tried to get away from him, and he was pretty relentless. Your thoughts?
Well, a few things. First of all, I thought her testimony was very powerful. I watched it. I thought she was a good witness. She appeared very sincere. Second, I'm surprised that when she originally tried to get the restraining order, before any of this happened, the judge denied it. But lastly, here's what it provides the prosecution. It provides that this guy was obsessed with her, Ms. Gambara, and that he was going to do anything to prevent her from being with someone else. Now, I know the defense tried to spin this a bit in terms of the opening statements. His attorney, who did a very good job in opening statement, tried to use this whole autism defense, how, you know, sometimes he just doesn't operate socially the way, quote unquote, normal people would. I didn't think that went that far. I don't think that holds a lot of weight, but still, this witness was a great witness for the state.
Yeah, she really was. You could just feel her emotion as she was talking. It was obviously very triggering for her, and I'm sure probably scary to be sitting near him after what she went through in all of this, according to police and her testimony. We'll leave it there for now, but we're going to be really digging into much more stunning testimony in the lover-stalker murder trial just ahead in Court TV Live. Joe, I'm so glad you're coming along with us. We're going to hit a break, but want to let you know, if you like this episode of Opening Statements, you can watch it again if you want, you can share it. Got it up on our website. Every day we put the shows up. Just click on the shows tab there on courttv.com.